Let's go now to Paul Kelly, of course, one of our regular guests, one we normally talk about the politics of the day. I guess, Paul, we are doing that. It's a fairly unfortunate situation from where we're sitting on some of the commentary that's come out of particularly the Nationals and the Greens. What have you made of it?
Well, I think the reality here, Tom, is that the fires are seen in the context of climate change, and that means that they are seen in a political way. I'm not surprised we've seen these comments. I think Scott Morrison has been sensible in terms of the position he's taken. His focus is the operational challenge, all the operational details, being preoccupied by that and saying that he won't address the climate change issue while the fires are still burning, but that must be addressed later.
I guess that's the question too, that later, and we're almost debating what's proper and right. We know the situation right now, and we've got these pictures coming in, Paul, of Turramurra. This is a fairly a fairly high residential area. You can see all the homes there. You can see how close the fire retardant has had to be dropped in this ongoing fire situation. It feels ridiculous to be, in one sense, having part of the political debate here. I get why people are saying, well, you know, this heightens what we should be doing in the future, but what should be happening here? Are we talking about let's wait a couple of weeks and then have a good proper chat about it? What have you made of, in particular, the Greens, I suppose, and the extent to which they've wanted to weigh into things?
Well, look, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have politicians commenting on this, but we don't live in an ideal world. Now, for the Greens, playing and manipulating the politics of climate change is their core business. This is their ideology. This is their business model. They always do this. And so when we've seen these fires and the great destruction which they've wrought, the technique and method of the Greens is to recruit this and mobilise this in terms of arguing for more action on climate change. Now, I think that is a flawed argument. I mean, essentially, it's clear that climate change didn't cause the fires. The fires have no doubt been exacerbated, and the length of the fire season is no doubt extended because of climate change. But to actually argue, as they've tried to argue, that Scott Morrison or the Morrison government is somehow responsible for these blazes is both untenable and despicable. So I think that's the judgment one would make about the Greens. The judgment one makes about the National Party is the National Party is divided and split here between its conservative base on the one hand and the fact that more and more of its own constituents are affected by these fires and are concerned about the fires and do draw the link between the fires and climate change. And I think we saw the national leader, Michael McCormack, coming to grips with this in the sense that what he was trying to do, which in a clear overreaction, was to attack the Greens, because what we're seeing is a struggle, if you like, for the political soul of regional Australia between the Greens and the Nationals.
Well, that's exactly the thing, isn't it, Paul Kelly? I'm just going to reference what people are seeing on the screen now. You can see the red there in the trees there is fire retardant that's been dropped on a blaze. There's a lot of smouldering there. Obviously, we're not seeing high flames, but we don't know what's going on in the bottom there and exactly to what extent it's still burning. This is South Turramurra, just on in Sydney. This is a suburb. You can see plenty of houses. There's bushland, but it's butts up against plenty of family homes there. And this is obviously a situation where we've had the warning issued just in the past 15 minutes from authorities. You are at risk and it's too late to leave, so to seek shelter if you're in this region. But this is what it goes to, I think, Paul, and you've hit the nail on the head, that the Nationals might have felt like they could offer the sort of rhetoric they have in 5 or 10 years ago, but they have a shifting electorate on this issue.
Well, they do, and I think the interesting thing will be to see what happens in a political sense beyond the fires, because the fact that Scott Morrison has said the task now is to focus on the operational issue, not climate change, in a sense that creates the expectation that afterwards he will say something about climate change, and frankly I think he's got to do that. And I think the context here would be a stronger recognition of the role of climate change and, of course, the need for very substantial on-the-ground and comprehensive plans to combat fires, which are clearly going to be more frequent. Beyond that, I'd make the general point that Morrison can't take to the next election in 3 years' time the same climate change policy that he took to this year's election in 2019, because what we will see is dramatic shift in the politics of climate change over the course of the next 3 years, and that will certainly demand from Morrison a reappraisal and a policy rethink during this term.
Yeah, look, it's a salient point, particularly, Paul, if you look at 2007, when the politics were very different there compared to the ensuing 10 years and the millennium drought at the time. We're back in this drought time and these fires on top of it. Paul, I will leave it there. I know we normally have a longer discussion, but obviously the situation's a little bit different. Thank you for your contribution. We'll talk again soon.